Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Tracy Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. You know what to do. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are streaming this episode. And maybe you're streaming this episode because you've already done that, but that's okay. Do it again. With me today, I have Yalonda Brown, who is a seasoned professional whose expertise spans over 20 years in both the private and public sectors. Her drive and self-determination has resulted in a myriad of demonstrable. Oh my gosh. See how I trip over my words? We're going to start that sentence over to my video editor. This is a note. Her drive and self-determination has resulted in a myriad of demonstrable accomplishments as an intuitive leader, thought partner, and high-functioning performer. Yalonda serves as the president of diversity initiatives for Engage Mentoring, where she leads the national expansion of diversity-focused mentoring and leadership programs for companies, universities, and nonprofits. She believes fervently that access to meaningful connections is a key component to driving inclusive cultures, which is going to be a huge part of what we talk about today. Yalonda holds a Master's of Science in Organizational Leadership and a host of certifications, including being a certified child and youth care practitioner. In addition, Yalonda is an entrepreneur, author, and speaker. She has written books and contributed chapters in multiple award-winning anthologies. Whether it's via public speaking or her published works, she leverages her formal education, real-world experiences, and her passion to inspire and motivate others to live according to their purpose. Collectively, her works help to build resilience, confidence, and character. Yalonda's work and insights have also been featured in SHRM, Diversity Q, and Diversity Professional Magazine, among others. She's a frequent speaker at industry conferences and events, and she currently lives in Avon, Indiana, with her husband, Vincent, and daughter, Kiara. Welcome to the podcast, Yalonda. What an amazing bio. I feel so inspired. Oh my gosh, of course. And I'm really, really excited that we're getting to broach this subject, not only from, your expertise in nonprofit and youth development and areas like that, but also just in general, like this core idea of access to relationships and how DE&I and all of that is really so connected to that access and the space that people are afforded. So I would love to just kind of dive in. I know that this is, this topic can take us through hours and hours and hours of content. Obviously, you've been a speaker on these topics for, in so many ways, but what would you say is like, your initial drive to focus on access to relationships? Like what really got you to this frontier within business and organizations?
Yes, that's a great question, Tracy. At it, I think it's sometimes so easy for us to um, take for granted the importance of relationships and how relationships are woven into every aspect of our
Yeah.
lives. And so when it comes to, when I think back to the individuals who have um, shaped my shaped who I am personally, shaped who I am professionally. It was those mentors and influencers that poured into me and
Mm.
helped me see my potential even before I did. And so the opportunity to serve now in helping organizations see that access to relationships specifically through the framework of mentoring, it's critical, and it's
Yeah.
especially critical when you look at it through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts.
Absolutely. This is a really good point. And, when I think about just like even the episodes, generally speaking, that we've done on DE&I, there's always, kind of this underlying, at least maybe it's just in my mind, but this underlying realization that there's so much and there's so much to DE&I. There's so much that companies can do. There's so much that companies are doing, maybe not doing. And I think that
Yes.
sometimes can be really overwhelming. I know I
Yeah.
have felt overwhelmed by the need to focus on the importance of DE&I while
Hmm.
also having the overwhelm of like, am I inadvertently excluding anyone in the initiatives? Like, like there's so, because the focus is to be inclusive through those
Yes.
measures, it can be a lot. And I know, thinking about the statistics from 2020, DE&I roles were some of the most commonly and newly created roles in businesses, which is amazing because
Yes.
then it's not this like role that's sitting within HR or just, on its own. It's really like this concept as a structure, as a focus for a business. So in your
Yeah.
role, you're the president of diversity initiatives. So you probably hear this a lot. You probably, maybe you even give advice that it's like, hey, let's focus on one thing at a time. But what do you see as like, as the most common piece of feedback when you're working potentially with clients or even your own team around diversity initiatives? And is there a way to kind of focus on one thing at a time to build up to the most equitable, inclusive, diverse, uh, you know, organization possible?
Yeah, such a great question. And so one thing that I want to say first is you mentioned, 2020, and that's what I call that's when the world blew up,
The reckoning,
around
right?
this
Yeah.
topic particularly. And, many organizations, as you said, were faced with various critical decisions, even, I remember at that time, the organization that I was with, that was when the decision was made that a DEI focused role was needed. We implemented a DEI council or
Wow.
committee, which many other organizations have done. And even some organizations, that's when the strategic plan had, it was time to add a area or set specific goals around, outcomes, around DEI. The challenge becomes, you know, even then and still yet today, when I talk to various, DEI focused leaders from around the country, the challenge is that, and if I'm sure you've heard this term DEI fatigue. There
Yeah.
is a trend that DEI leaders are tired, that they feel unsupported and, with unfulfilled or stalled activities that were high on the list 2 and 3 years ago. But now, budget cuts, shifts in
Hmm.
organizational priorities, overall really lack of authority, and really not having a true voice at the table. you
Yeah.
know that is the case in some organizations, not all. There are some organizations that are really getting this right, and those organizations, quite honestly, Tracy, were getting it right long before the reckoning. And
Mm.
that is, there are some organizations that already had these things, top of mind, top of focus, where they were committed to driving diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. They
Yeah.
understood, the need, um, long before it became a popular thing to do. And so, unfortunately, there are organizations. I just talked to an individual a few weeks ago, and I often hear, I'm a team of one. I'm a team of
Hmm.
one. I can only do so much. And sometimes it's embedded in the HR initiative. Sometimes it's under a talent development team, learning and development team, and that matters too. The structure within an organization, that also helps to determine the autonomy, the budget allotment, the power, the true voice and representation that a DEI leader within an organization will have. And so that matters in, how initiatives get rolled out, where the commitment level is, because, you know and then when you tie it to the access to relationships piece, it really helps to broaden perspective. It helps to build community and remove barriers within organizations, but it has to start at the top, with
Yeah.
leadership buy-in. So if that DEI person isn't doesn't have a seat at the table with the other senior executive leaders, then what does
Mm-hmm.
that
Right.
say?
Right. I'm like over here saying amen in my head because that's usually the crux of most issues actually when there's some new initiative. And of course, as an HR person, I think about this in my own frame of mind because when DE&I roles have not existed at companies that I've worked with, that was an HR focused or sponsored initiative. And
Yeah,
HR teams are notoriously very lean. And
yes,
with that, it's like, how is their priority placed on, all of the priorities? Because everything, when you're a lean team, is technically a priority because you have to get
yes,
it all done. But with this, the reckoning of 2020, where everyone's like, wow, we really need to pay attention to this. You're right that
yes.
it was such a different environment in the sense that companies had more money than they do today. It seems that way, at least.
Mhm, mhm.
Of course, there were layoffs then as there are now, but in general, the willingness or the elasticity around the budget, let's say, was much more
Yes,
giving than it is today. And so, of course, naturally, there's at least from what I've seen, organizations that see HR functions, DE&I, learning and development as a cost center, which if
yeah,
anyone has been here for a long time, listening to my early episodes, I take huge issue with this. Like HR is not a cost center. But the reality is that when a company views a structure or a function that way, it's going to be easier to make budget cuts, even if,
yes.
DE&I is as important as it is in an organization. So I think it's a really interesting perspective that you bring up. And then on the other side of things, it makes me think about how, when there is that DE&I fatigue or there is that party of one, how
Yes.
do they decide what those priorities are then? And maybe that company doesn't have a diversity statement yet, so that's priority number one, because you have to be able to have the actual ethos or the space for diversity in order to be even able to talk about it. So it's just an interesting and I think very complex position that businesses have to understand that they're in, regardless of whether they have the role or not.
That's absolutely right. That is it. That because when you normalize it, you don't have to call it anything because the behaviors and the
Right.
strategy around these things, these aren't new. They just may have the DEI name attached
Title.
to it, but
Right.
really it should be normalized as part of the culture because all of these things really help drive employee engagement. It drives, especially, and mentoring definitely is not new.
No, right.
Sometimes I feel like it's such a battle, with some organizations when we're talking because that we know that mentoring works. We know that we have uh, I know that our product is amazing, and I know we'll talk about that. But the thing is that mentoring isn't new.
Mm.
Access to relationships isn't new. Individuals being able to leverage um, support and sponsorship within organizations and coaching, none of these things are new. And so that's why it's like, why is this so hard? Why is this so hard? Because it's just simply not in the top five, even we find, of initiatives and strategies that organizations leverage. And so it's sometimes, and because my background, I've been dealing with mentoring, whether it was mentoring youth or other professionals or being mentored. It's just always been a part of my makeup,
Mhm.
and my career trajectory, quite honestly. And so it's really hard to understand why this is just not normalized and commonplace.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about, the reality of someone who is in this DE&I role or an HR focused DE&I role, however the structure is set up at an organization, and if or whether or not they have that seat at the table, at the executive table specifically. And
Yes.
if they don't, how mentoring could work for them internally. I mean, it can, it's a pretty thankless role when you are servicing employees as an employee yourself. And I've talked about this a
Mhm.
few times that HR DE&I, like those, the learning and development, those roles are misunderstood in the sense that they are providing services to employees. They themselves are employees. And so they have a different type of like skin in the game, so to speak.
Hmm.
But other functions don't have that same understanding. And so when it comes to normalizing, as you've said, normalizing these concepts and ideas, it's also kind of like a change management issue. Like I think about even just fundamentally, if people or
Yes.
organizations are not including, you know, diverse or diversity, equity, and inclusion at the hiring stage in the sense of like how they think through hiring, how they
Yeah.
like enable access and things like that, what types of questions that they're asking or not asking. When that, that's like a perfect example of like when you build that into the culture at an organization, you don't even think twice about it. Now you've actually enabled someone to have that muscle memory for how to create space for individuals, whether it's making sure someone on their interview team or that their interview team in general is
Yes.
representative of the organization's diversity, or
Mm.
the questions that kind of share the ethos and the culture of the organization around D, like all of those things. And so I can imagine in a place where someone is a party of one, that
Yes.
they probably need mentorship more than ever because it's such a siloed feeling. And
Yes.
they probably don't really have that same access. So I would love to kind of shift gears into that. Like, how do companies create that space for mentorship? When we think about like what you've mentioned around access to relationships, how does that all connect with these DE&I focused initiatives?
The reason that organizations sometimes um, they fare better, if you will, with um, implementing, and whether it's internal or an external structured mentoring program like what we offer, it is important that first mentoring and access to relationships becomes a part of the business strategy, that it is tied specifically to whether it's retention goals, whether it is um, diverse representation amongst teams, whether it is, thinking about how, what results they want as it relates to employee engagement. How are they looking at those types of things? And equitable access to opportunities for development. There are many data points um, available that speak to mentored employees versus non-mentored employees, that there is increased retention, that there is increased promotability for, especially as it relates to minorities and women. There's several thoughts around how access to relationships and mentoring helps to improve cultural competencies. And so we know that mentoring, when applied through the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, is absolutely going to help build inclusion and belonging. It's going to help eliminate those um, the siloed communication that sometimes exists within organizations. And so when we work with organizations, we offer, a solution that not only offers the one-on-one mentoring, but it offers group mentoring. We have diversity focused forums that employees are able to participate in. So we have one for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We have one that's pride focused. We have one for women called Project Lead for Women and developing leaders. And we're really excited because, as I mentioned earlier, when mentoring and access to relationships is happening at all levels of the organization, we know that better outcomes result. And so we have launched some executive forums for C suite leaders and those involved in the HR and DEI space. We do that because we know that it can be lonely at the top, it can be
Mm-hmm.
this siloed communication that takes place. And we know that senior leaders need a space um, in which they can share challenges, a place in which they can also share best practices and learn from one another. And so we believe that there is no better way to do that than by, having a, a structured mentoring program. And we love, you know, I call it walking leaders through a process of enlightenment, to just
Oh, I
say
love that.
that, um, let's take really, and I say take a heart look. There's a hard look, and then there's the heart look, where
Hmm.
we're looking at really what is the heart of our organization. How do we want our employees to feel when they walk out the door? And so mentoring can be leveraged, as a benefit. And that's how we hope people will view what it is that we offer them, through our work at
Hmm.
Engage Mentoring, that we want um, you know, them to feel that they have a tool, that they have resources that employees can hang their hat on to feel, I'm proud that my company is investing in my well-being. I'm proud, that
Hmm.
my company understands that there are things that will help develop me holistically, not just on, one-sided as it relates necessarily to the task associated with my job, but helping them be better, and so, having because our matching, that's one of the reasons that many mentoring programs fail. Matching, bad matching, not having, being able to measure. And that's, you asked me what were the challenges that I hear most. Companies want to know, how can I measure the effectiveness of a mentoring program, of the engagement that's going forth,
Mm.
and that is something that we definitely try to support, because we have reporting that looks at engagement. What are the number? I had a conversation yesterday with a leader, and I was able to say, you know, of your participants, you had 59 mentoring sessions take place.
Wow.
That equates to over 100 hours of mentoring and development that took place for
Wow.
these employees that you selected as participants.
That's
And that
incredible.
means a lot. Yes, and there are some companies that have 100% engagement, and we're proud of that. We average 90% engagement. So think about a company who has 100 participants, who achieves 100% engagement, meaning that they are all leveraging the resource that a company has invested in. There is no better, you know, feeling, than knowing that an investment is making a difference in the lives of employees. And lastly, I'm sorry, I'm talking, but it's
No,
so good. It gets
please.
me
I
fired
love
up.
it.
It's so exciting, but knowing that the other piece, um, the matching that takes place in our platform, it's based on topics, Tracy, and that means that I, as a participant, I can select what I value most, what I need most, to know that I can talk about, if my need is to understand how to um, grow my business acumen, or I'm a single parent. We even have single parenting in the
Mhm.
platform as a topic. How often does that come up in a performance management conversation?
Right, right.
Because there are just so many other things. It's not that there aren't, um, companies that value that topic. It's just, it doesn't always come up, because I may not feel comfortable, talking
Hmm.
about what I'm managing at home, because I don't want
Right.
it to make me appear that I can't do the job,
Sure.
effectively, and so there's so, um, many benefits that, I just love, talking to organizations about. And um, you know knowing that when it is viewed as a value add at all levels, the outcomes are tremendous.
Oh, man. I have so many questions, but I'm not going to throw them at you at one time like I would normally do.
Ready, I'm ready.
My like I'm so inspired by what you all do and the outcomes because I work for not like a small organization, but we're a tech startup and we're small but mighty in the sense of like what we're doing. And so my first question
Yes.
was like, is there a barrier to entry as far as like what the ideal company size is in order to be able to support mentorship and like those relationships?
Oh, such a great question. We are really one of the only platforms that is scalable and works with companies of all sizes. Our largest client is deployed in 17 countries, and our smallest client is an 8-person recruitment firm.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, because we definitely know that mentoring matters for
Yeah.
all companies, and we want to be inclusive of all companies of all sizes, and we are, and our platform is scalable as such, and that is something that we're very proud of. We are one of the only platforms that offer of its kind that offers um, the an external mentoring option, where employees can have
Wow.
access to participants both inside and outside of their organizations.
Wow.
And we are so proud of that, and we are proud from the um, aspect of we hold a net promoter score of 78. The average industry average is 36.
Mm.
We know that um, engagement, that no pun, but kind of sort of on the name, that we're called engaged mentoring for a reason,
Right.
and we um we're very proud, of the product, and proud that we're able to scale with companies and grow with them. If they pilot 100 employees, or if they pilot, you know 50 or more, our sweet spot is companies with employees between 50 and 500, but we definitely work outside of that scope as well, and
That's
we have clients that represent that.
If your company is remote or hybrid, then you know just how difficult it can be to grow your company's culture beyond a pre scheduled Zoom happy hour or occasional lunch and learn. Well, this week's sponsor is here to solve that. They're called CultureBot. CultureBot has devised what will likely become the gold standard for growing and blossoming a company culture inside of Slack. The app is like a sidekick for any HR or people professional, automating a lot of the mundane tasks you probably are forgetting to do on a daily basis. Things like birthday and work anniversary celebrations, team shoutouts and kudos, employee introductions, and remote games. It even has health and wellness tips and conversation starters. If that piques your interest, this will get you even more excited. Today, I'm able to share a special promotion for listeners of the podcast. You can get your first 6 months of CultureBot for 50% off. Plus, if your team is under 25 employees, CultureBot is free forever. So if you're looking for a way to create a culture of appreciation and drive increased engagement and togetherness across your team, I definitely recommend checking out CultureBot. Go to getculturebot.com/humanhr. That's getculturebot.com/humanhr to get the offer. Plus, I've added the link in the show notes so you can just click right there. Now, let's get back to the podcast. That's amazing. And I think it sounds like you guys have a lot to be proud of. I mean, to hear
Yes.
that there are companies of fewer than 10 employees prioritizing mentorship, let alone being able to take part in that, I think is really,
Yes.
really cool. I I really think that, when I think back on my career, and I'm sure that you, given your role and engaged mentoring and what you do, maybe you can relate to this as well, that there are so many people, and we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, that there's so many people who come in and out of your life that have an impact
Yes.
on your career, whether it's just like the professional stuff and truly career driven stuff that you do, or even as you have a family and how you integrate your career with your personal life. Like, there's so many people that have small but mighty, and sometimes just like really large and mighty influences on our experiences. And that's it's not lost on me that mentorship, even if it's not in a formal environment, is so
Yes.
critical to someone feeling really connected to the bigger picture, the organization, feeling engaged
Yes.
in what they do. And this like other thing that I thought about before when I had all of these questions in my mind is that it probably, and I would love to know like some facts on this if you have it too, but it probably is like a super symbiotic relationship in the sense that the mentor feels really good about what they're able to do and they're engaged because they're involved beyond the scope of their day-to-day role. And the mentee is obviously super engaged because they're getting, this wealth of knowledge from someone that's invested in their career development. And it's not necessarily
Yes.
their boss. This is someone else taking the time.
Right.
Is that an accurate statement? I hope.
Yes, no, it is. It is an accurate statement in that there are benefits on both sides, benefits for the mentor and the mentee. Yes, feeling um, fulfillment, for themselves and their ability to transfer knowledge to someone else and pour into someone else's lives and speak into their success,
Mm-hmm.
and as a mentee, yes, I feel, um, fulfilled from the point of that someone is investing in me, that I'm able to also have a space for um, not only sharing my experiences, but learning and just being a sponge for that knowledge transfer. But one thing that I love about that is also unique about us, our participants, Tracy, we invite to serve as both mentee and mentor.
Oh,
Why do we do that? Because we believe there is no better way than for someone to grow their capacity than by viewing themselves as a mentor. So that's why that topical matching that I mentioned earlier is so important, because even if I'm a new professional, can at least select one topic. And this is what I encourage when I find that a participant hasn't yet flipped the switch to serving as a mentor, also, because everyone comes in as a mentee, obviously, but they are invited from the beginning to serve as a mentor also, because I believe that um, and I can't say there has to be, because everyone doesn't feel comfortable right away, but I encourage at least one topic that, and I'll give you an example. She was an executive assistant to a very um, influential senior leader. Okay. And she had not selected to serve as a mentor yet. And she said, I don't feel comfortable. She said, I don't feel that I know enough. I don't feel that I'm experienced enough. I haven't achieved enough yet. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
you work for one of the most influential, respected leaders in the country. I said, even if you select organizational skills, that is something that I am
Right.
certain someone could benefit from hearing from you, and how you have navigated this relationship, with a high demand, leader. And
Wow.
she said, wow. She said, I guess you're right. I said, because I know that can't be easy. You know what I
No,
mean?
most
But
people would not want that job.
not at all. And so that's why I know there is value in the topical piece, and that everyone can benefit from doing both. And not only that, we teach individuals how to mentor. We're one of the only software products of its kind that has a training and certification built into it. And so our participants have 6 courses built into our platform that they can complete. And when they complete it, Tracy, they get a mentoring certification along with a badge that they can
Wow.
display on their LinkedIn. Because again, and these courses, and they are good. Like, I went through them, of course. Well, I would hope I would have my certification,
Right, right.
but it's good content. And it even allowed me, even as according to my bio, I'm a seasoned professional and my experiences, but they helped me. They helped me look introspectively at, things that I still have yet to do. Because that's the other piece. When we feel as leaders that we've arrived and we can't benefit from mentoring and learning more, then we've lost our
Mhm.
effectiveness,
Mhm.
and so I have a mentor in the platform. I've had mentors and mentees. And the other piece, um along with our program, so we also impact the next generation, because for every employee sponsored in our program, it allows us to sponsor a college student in our program
Wow.
as well. And so think about a college student being able to, now they are participating as mentee only. So they're the only ones in our platform, that are mentee only. But think about a college student who is able to select a younger professional not too far out, from them and their experiences, right out of college, or,
Yeah.
because it's multi-generational. And then, as a seasoned leader, there is value in reverse mentoring, so it's not always about who has the most years of experience or the same level, as we do. It is reverse mentoring works. I think I have made a personal goal to be more intentional about cross cultural mentoring. Choosing someone that
Mm,
doesn't check one of the same diversity boxes that I do, because
yeah.
that's also another way for me to learn and grow and broaden my perspective.
Absolutely. Wow, there's so much to unpack in all of that. I mean, first of all, with the executive assistant example, I literally got the chills because I was like, wow, not
Mhm.
only did this person kind of have some self doubt and, in a
Yeah.
way, like diminish the work that they do, just whether it's related to their
Yes.
title or experience or whatever, they then, like, in sharing their feelings and their nervousness or their anxieties around this, they then exponentially developed their careers. I mean, like, they grew as an individual, they grew within their career. They probably are more engaged in what they do. They're probably more engaged with their leader. I mean, that is such a cool story. And, regardless of the title that someone has, we should never diminish out of, the things that we do. I mean, everyone starts somewhere. Everyone, goes through school, whether they go to college or not, and they decide on what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. Everyone has that stage. And then everyone's new
Yes.
at something at some point, and everyone's growing at something at some point. So I just really love that example of how mentorship is an investment in someone's career development and their confidence and their self-worth also. Like, I
Yes.
really, in a way, I felt emotional when you shared that story, but
Mhm.
maybe that's just me. But it's like, I
Yeah.
think back to all of those times that I was a mentor, and there were people who did share, like, I'm only an HR admin, or I'm only an intern. And it's
Yes.
like, we got to take only out of the vocabulary. You are
Yes.
an intern, you are
Yes.
an HR admin, but what's next? How are we going to get you to the next thing? Or if this is the thing, how do you
Yeah.
become like the best at that thing, and really proud of the work that you do. So I feel really honored to know that story, and I appreciate you sharing that with all of us. And the second thing that I was thinking about as you were sharing this is that I would imagine, and I'd love to hear if you have, like, even, I guess, like, statistics on this at all, but I would imagine that when there is that investment in an individual as a mentor or a mentee, and I loved what you said about cross cultural and cross diverse, like really expanding who we believe we relate to, because we
Mhm.
have different things that we can relate on with different people, depending on their career, their background, their social or economic situation, all those things. But is there any type of evidence or statistics around how someone feels then further engaged in their company, in the sense of, like, how much longer they're staying, like what, further
Mhm.
tenure looks like? Is there anything around that? Because I would imagine that when a mentor and a mentee are involved in this relationship and engaged in this relationship, that, and we
Mhm.
know that relationships are often the thing that keep people longer in an organization, that there would
Yeah.
be some sort of tangible improved tenure or, like, reduced attrition as a result of this type of initiative.
Absolutely. There are some statistics that, and I feel terrible because I'm trying to think where the study came from, but it was 94% of employees said they would stay at a company longer if they were
Mm.
offered opportunities to learn and grow. And I know, and I can't remember where it came from. Oh
If
my
we can
gosh.
find it, we can link it in the show notes, so no worries.
Yes, I will. I will find that for you and make sure that I send it to you. But
Awesome.
94% of employees that were, it was right around that the early part of the pandemic, that 2 year mark, that said
Mhm.
they would have stayed longer had they been offered opportunities to learn and grow. 34% increase in retention
Wow.
for mentored versus non-mentored employees, and 24% or 23% increase in promotion and retention rates for minorities and women,
Wow. Those are big
as
numbers.
compared, yes, to non-mentored employees. So there is value for
Wow.
sure in mentoring or access to, growth opportunities for employees. Absolutely.
Wow. Wow. I can't say I'm surprised because it makes sense. Like there's intrinsically there that makes sense that there's a connection between engagement and tenure and promotion also with
Yeah.
these relationships as you've mentioned. And then I guess like on the flip side of this, when when we think about like getting feedback, especially from like the HR side of things, we get a lot of feedback around career development if we're running engagement surveys, satisfaction surveys, or even just
Mhm.
talking and kind of keeping a pulse on the organization. And I've had so many conversations with leaders that when we think about career development, there's not a linear relationship with career development being bad and access to a promotion. Career development is like
Mhm.
this whole spectrum of things, and mentorship is a huge part of that. It's like, how do we grow
Yes.
and expand our knowledge, our exposure to other people, to other sides of the business that maybe someone's interested in? So it sounds like you and your and engage mentoring are really doing a nice job of just like thinking about career development holistically, because it's not just about like more money and more responsibility. Not everyone wants that. Some people want to be in
That
their
is
role
so
but grow. Yeah.
yes. And they want a culture that makes them feel that they belong, that they feel valued. There was a study done by Glassdoor, and 12 to 1 culture was more important than compensation.
Mhm.
12
Mhm.
times more important to employees was culture over compensation. And sometimes there's so much focus on saying that people are leaving for more money. That's not always the case. People
No.
are leaving to go even do lesser demanding, um, lesser responsibility, and all those types of things because the culture takes precedence over
Yeah.
some of the other things that we have rated very highly,
Yes.
as leaders in the past.
Yes,
Things
it's
have
true.
shifted. Priorities have changed. People want to feel that they can show up authentically. People want to feel that they are valued and that they're holistically their perspectives matter. They're lived, and we as leaders have to um, really do better at understanding people's lived experiences that they bring
Yes.
to the workplace. We must know that the book sense, if you will, that we bring isn't all that shows up with us
Right. Right.
on a
There's so much
daily
more.
basis. Yes, so much more. And so I think, leaders who miss that, who don't value and really understand how to bring out um, the richness and the diversity of experiences of their team members. They're just not getting the full breadth of who they are.
Absolutely. I always like to say that 2020 was really the year that allowed us to see that gone are the days where people like leave their stuff at the door. I'm not willing to
Yeah.
call it baggage because I don't think it's baggage. It's like experience, life
Yeah.
experience, right? But employees are not doing that. They're like, oh, yep, I'm a parent, I'm a mother, I'm a husband, whatever, father, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And I have all of these things going on, and you have to accept me for who I am and the challenges that I have. And I need to have,
Yes.
some sort of psychological safety in the place of work so that I can
Yes.
be myself and I can feel comfortable letting some of that go while at work, because it's
Yes.
not to say that people are always bringing that with them, but in the sense that they're necessarily talking about it all the time or bringing it to
Yes.
their day to day, but it sits with you. And especially if you work
Yeah.
remotely, I mean, we saw so many women leave the workforce because of the pressure for needing to be home while schools were closed during COVID and stuff like that. I mean, there's a reverberation still throughout society, especially in the United States, where women are still actively trying to figure out how they make being at home potentially still, or putting a different emphasis on being home while not sacrificing
Yes.
their careers and their career trajectory. And it's not easy, and it's also easily solvable if a company can understand that there has
Yeah.
to be space made for all of that.
Yes. If companies can understand how to um, accommodate, in a way that supports everyone involved.
Right.
It's just the
Everyone.
bottom is creating more flexible options,
Yes.
just not being as rigid. It doesn't mean that we still don't have expectations. It doesn't mean that the work has to suffer, but we
Right.
have to think differently about the work and be willing to be flexible and really help um help individuals still for me it increases organizational commitment when I
Mm-hmm.
know that my employer cares enough to shift
Right.
shift on the behalf for the betterment of the workforce,
Yes.
and so it just really it says a lot, about organizations that are willing to just put inclusion first, inclusion in the workplace, creating an environment where everyone feels respected, valued, and supported. It's just it's just a win-win.
It is a
It is a
win-win.
win-win.
It really is. And I just love that we've been able to come full circle in connecting how, the access to relationships and mentoring and all of that to DE&I and how it's so interconnected, and that this is the heart
Yes.
of DE&I is like making that space, understanding that we all have come from different life experiences and backgrounds, and there are similarities and differences and the like, and that companies can really just like focus their efforts on the relationship, which is so important in
Yeah.
everything. Like relationships are everything to career growth, to, potentially someone's ability to get their next job. Like relationships are everything. So if we just keep it simple and we remember that and we invest
Yeah.
in that, it's like the DE&I focus that companies have to have can really become like organically driven just by thinking about the value that's placed on how people connect and relate to one another and understand one another. So I can't tell you how inspired I'm feeling going into today. Like it's just the start of our day here already, but I really, really appreciate all of your experiences that you've brought to this episode, and just the I don't know, like the perspective that you've added to like how we can, calm down the overwhelm that potentially people are feeling, and really think about what is the purpose of DE&I, what is the purpose of people
Yes.
feeling connected and like they belong at work, and that is so much of that relies on this, these relationships and access to those relationships. So I really, really appreciate you and your experience and engage mentoring and everything that you all are doing.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you for all that you bring, just your authenticity,
Oh,
and offering this
thanks.
platform to your audience, and it just it's inspiring, and I hope that everyone takes from this segment that you know there is a cost to doing DEI,
Yeah.
and there is a cost to not doing it. There
Hmm.
is a cost to mentoring, and there is a cost to not providing access to relationships. And when companies and leaders evaluate both sides of it, I'm
Hmm.
certain that, you know, we will find that the cost is much greater to not have these types of initiatives and strategy in play. And so that's what I would like to leave your audience with. And please, visit us, visit our website. We're on all social media platforms, but our website is www.engagementoring.com. Please look at, what we have to offer. Would love to talk to you and connect with you.
Amazing. And I also would love to plug, because I wrote a note for myself to remember this, that this episode is coming out the day before your birthday, Yolanda. So happy early birthday. I'm glad that we could give this to you
Yeah,
as a little birthday present. But
thank
I
you.
hope that it's like the best birthday ever. And I really, again, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you for sharing those resources. Everything for the listeners will be linked in the show notes. So If you didn't catch engagementoring.com, don't worry, you can click the link in the show notes and get connected. And I'll also link Yalonda's LinkedIn so that you can connect with her directly as well. Yalonda, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.